Hey, it's Millie, and welcome to the Generalist World podcast. This is a show where I interview people from the Generalist World community, and we talk things like the future of work, careers, predictions, their hot takes, and really understand what their squealy careers have looked like. So if you're a generalist who feels like they're living in a specialized world, this is the podcast for you. Avi is in the podcast studio. Hey, Avi, how are you? Welcome to the GW podcast.
Thank you so much. Hi, Millie. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, we have already been on a few tangents pre this call, so I am so looking forward to exploring many threads with you. And I wanted to set the scene for folks. Can we give them some of these threads? What are some of like the golden threads that have followed you, that have defined, that has been a part of your story?
Totally. My name is Avi Love. I use she and they pronouns. I live in the Bay Area in California in the United States. These days, I am a coach in gender, sexuality, and relationships, and also art and creativity. I'm a writer professionally. There's a bunch of avenues of like music that I'm exploring. I have a photography portfolio that I have never done anything with professionally. And I used to run pretty high level operations in nonprofit behavioral health world for a number of years. So I grew up in the weird confluence of like my grandfather was a software engineer who, so what was called a software engineer in his day, and in our day we would probably call it hardware, who worked on some of the first computers for the military. And my grandmother was a very prolific painter. My mom was a jewelry artist. So I've been
Wow.
doing both art and tech since I was very, very young.
Wow. And what has like drawn you to the work that you do now? How have you ended up as a coach?
I was in denial about it for a long time. As an 11-year-old, back in the days of AOL Instant Messenger, a bunch of Gen Z just went, "What the hell are you talking about?" I used to have like multiple chat windows open at the same time, and a bunch of my friends in middle school, who mostly were girls, would send me text messages from their boyfriends. Boyfriends were 11, being like, what's going on in his head? What does he actually mean? And like, I
Mm.
just always was so fascinated by that question that I was like, yeah, I'll deep dive into your boyfriend, not boyfriend's 11-year-old psychology and figure out what's going on here. So, needless to say, like, over the course of the next 20 years or so, I'm 37 now, but over the course of at least the next couple of decades since then, I constantly had like therapist friends and, people in my life who were like, why don't you do this? And I was like, because it's not what I want to do. And there was an element of truth to that insofar as what I believe therapy is, also in part because I have written policy and procedure for therapists, is at its most fundamental essence of like, why do we license a therapist to be a therapist? Why is this like a licensed medical profession rather than just, an area of self-improvement? And the fundamental reason is because a human system can get to such a dysregulated state that they no longer have, I guess what I would say is effective access to things like interoception, to, what's going on in my body, what's my current emotional state, what's going on in my thought process, and just how do I navigate that? And so the fundamental element to me of why therapy is a licensed profession is because that is what a therapist is allowed to do that really I don't think anyone else should be attempting to do without a certain level of training, is not helping someone who has endured a tremendous amount of difficult experiences or trauma or whatever has led them to that point, in leading them, very gently by the hand, often over the course of years, from a place of, I have no idea what's going on in my own system, to, oh, actually, I can effectively name what's going on in my own system and hold that with a degree of care. And I was like, that's a wonderful profession. That is not what I want to do. Half the reason that therapists would ask me why I'm not a therapist is because they would come to me with a problem and I would just bluntly name what was obviously going on in their psychology. And they would be like, why don't you do this? And I would be like, because this is the version of it that I like. The version of it that I like is not the version where I can see what's going on with a client for 2 years and I'm just not telling them. The version of it that I like is someone who already knows their own stories and is pretty acclimated to the world comes to me and is like, what's going on with this thing? And I'm like, sounds to me like there's something in that space of that thing that you just said. And for a long time, I didn't see a path in that. For a long time, what coaching was kind of life coaching. And no shade to anyone who defines themselves as a life coach, but like it was a very, very poorly regulated profession. Coaching in general, obviously, is still completely unregulated, but there really wasn't a solid map of like, what is this thing and what kind of value do you get from that? And since then, especially in the past like 5 to 10 years or so, I really think in a lot of ways we're in this sort of like coaching renaissance to probably overblow it,
Mm.
which is just there's this proliferation of like somatic coaches, people who coach in art, people who coach in music. Like you have there I see more and more people who are defining themselves as like vocal coaches rather than singing teachers. There's
Mm.
just this proliferation of the idea that like I am engaging with you on a deep personal level about something that is important to you that you're not really in the space that you're looking for what is conventional therapy, or
Mm.
you're not really in the space that there's I guess the thing that you're looking for is like I feel like part of my aliveness, part of my expansion is going in this direction in art, or it's going in this direction in my relationships, or I have some part of my gender identity that I want to explore, whatever that thing looks like. And it's like, great, I'm totally signed up for that conversation. I would love to dive in with someone and, explore those kinds of questions with them. And so I think it was the combination of like coaching and the overall sort of landscape of what we consider personal growth work to be, hitting a point where I could identify myself in that landscape. And also just like being a huge nerd and deep diving in psychology and sexuality and gender and relationships and all of the things over the course of my 20s, and on the art and creativity side doing told you earlier off of this conversation, but like started out in character animation, used to be in film industry, and like, having all of these creative avenues, and eventually realizing that part of what I had gained and enjoyed in all of that was having deep conversations with people about where they're at in their journeys, where they're trying to go, and what really draws them to what they're doing.
Okay, I have a million questions. This is going to be difficult. My first one is actually the last thing you said around deep conversations, because it feels like, particularly if you spend any amount of time on socials, it's just shallow, shallow. You're playing in the shallows. And
Totally.
I feel myself like craving,
Yeah.
craving this like depth. And I wonder if you have any advice or ways that you think about creating safe spaces for deep
Mm.
conversation to emerge.
I think there's a baseline there that depends upon the community. I'm in the Bay Area in California. Like we are the poster child for there's a facilitated workshop. There's like 10 facilitated workshops basically every night. And they're all run by like therapists and somatic coaches and whoever. So like I'm in definitely what is a bubble of a culture that is people who are just like on average super ready to just drop in and have the sort of like deep intimate experience with other humans. I think in general, to me it's about the awareness of where I am culturally and sort of, what the norms of that are, what people are used to or are not used to, and being able to adjust for that. And then from there, it's creating a container. And
Mm.
the reality of social media is an absolutely atrocious container. if we envision social media as a real life container, like if the thing that you did is show up to a workshop and basically like five people trauma dumped on you, three people had brief wedding announcements, and in between all of it, you were just being bombarded with advertisements for things to buy, like it would just be a miserable experience. Nobody would walk
Oh my
away from that
goodness.
3 hours being like, oh yeah, I had a great time and really connected with other humans. And so it's both taking the time within a container to be able to ground into the space, to be able to slow down a little bit, and then to be able to just sort of set norms of, speaking from your own experience and I statements and that kind of thing. And that we're not here to fix or change anyone. We're not here to
Mm.
correct someone else's experience or tell them what they should do or, any of that kind of thing. We're here to actually experience and hear each other as people. And, keeping an open mind in terms of experiences that may be unfamiliar to us, basically holding the intention that everyone is doing their best, which is not to preemptively excuse someone making a mistake, but that if someone does make a mistake, that we're holding it as a mistake, not holding it as like an indictment of their character
Mm.
or, a
Mm.
sign of like, this is just who you are as a person, and now I need to dismiss you forever. The proverbial internet cancel culture of it all. And that plus what I think is incredibly critical, which is some kind of clearing or repair practice. So, if someone does make a mistake, if there is kind of a connective rupture between people, that we have some process by which that can be voiced and they can talk with each other about it, and there's repair for that. So those kinds of norms to a container then set up an environment where people start feeling safe enough to go deeper into conversation. I think it's also very similar norms to what it is on a one-on-one level, but as far as any kind of group facilitated work,
Mm.
that to me is a lot of what's required.
Mm. Beautifully said. And I want to jump back actually to
Yeah.
something you said earlier, which is like reverberating in my brain, which is that you were in denial about becoming a coach. And it stuck with me because it's such a strong word. And I see it everywhere I look, where people will say privately or in the DMs or in a side conversation, I know this job is not for me. I know I've got to get
Yeah.
out. I know I've got to pivot. So I guess that's even one step away from denial. Sometimes you just see
Totally.
that people are miserable and burnt out. What have you learned about getting unblocked when you're in this phase of denial?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a number of things. I love thinking about alignment. It is just eternally fascinating to me. And what I mean by that is like, how much does the state of my mental processes, and I'm saying that very intentionally to not mistake it for thoughts at the content level, because thoughts at the content level are pretty arbitrary.
Mm.
But, does my mental state in terms of how fast my mind is moving or like how, do I feel sort of chaotic, or do I feel like maybe my mind only makes sense to me, but it only makes sense to me in a way that feels good for me? And does that feel in line with what's going on in my heart and what's going on in my emotions, with what's going on in my gut? Does it feel aligned with what's going on in my body, with, simple things like how I'm holding my shoulders or where muscular
Mm.
tension exists, or if I'm experiencing any kind of pain, do I feel attentive to that in a way that makes sense, or does it feel totally off kilter in some way? And then what I refer to as intuition, which is just sort of, this internal sense that we have of, is something off, or does it feel right, or does it feel wrong, to put it in the simplest terms. And I think we all have this innate sense of our own alignment. And often the thing that happens is we're trained out of it. in one way or another, we express at certain points in our lives, like, oh, that doesn't feel aligned to me. And the thing that we're told is either push through it, or that's just a necessary part of life, or things just feel like that sometimes, or
Mm.
whatever the story is. And unbeknownst to us in those moments, we're being told that by someone who has also been pushed out of their own alignment. So that's not someone who is in a deeply aligned place telling us how to be in a deeply aligned place. That's someone who's probably off kilter themselves, being like,
Mm.
well, yeah, that's normal. That's just how life feels. And so, the thing to your question within that, and it's something I've done variations of improv for a long time. One of the things that I really, really love in improv is if you're making it hard for yourself, it's going to be bad improv. There is no way to be in a place of, oh shit, am I getting this wrong? Oh, maybe the audience doesn't like this. Or, oh my God, what did my scene partner say? And I don't even remember what their name was. Like, there's no way to be in that place and for it to have any chance of being enjoyable to watch. The
Mm.
audience is now also stressed out. They're watching you have a breakdown on stage going, this doesn't feel good. And so the single largest rule of improv is actually not yes and. It's you have to be making it easy on yourself. You have to be in this state of, well, whatever comes out of my mouth is what comes out of my mouth. And if I forget their name, then I forgot their name. And you just have to be in that easy state of flow. And so to your initial question, if we are in a place of alignment and we're in a place of ease, then we do the things that flow the most naturally to us. And generally, what happens is we've been taught some story over the course of our lives that the things that flow most naturally to us are something to be suspicious of somehow. They're either not the thing that's going to make us money, or they're not the thing that's going to connect us with other people, or they're not, whatever that particular story happens to be for the individual, and that the thing that we need to be doing is making things hard for ourselves, and that's how we're going to know that the thing is right for us is because it feels hard. And so what ultimately happens, and it's a conversation I had with a dear friend a number of years ago, is what's the thing that you find easy? And
Mm.
it doesn't mean that it's easy all the time. It doesn't mean that there's no challenges in it. It doesn't mean that you're never going to mess it up. But just like, what's the thing that you do so intuitively that you don't notice you do it? The idea that, people once in a while will ask me how long I've been writing, and it's a very confusing question to me because I never wasn't. I was telling stories from the time that I could talk, and I was writing them down as soon as I could figure out how to put a pen on paper. And so, like, that is something that is so intuitive to me that I just can't imagine not doing it. And it's very similar with the coaching, where it's just like, I would just get into deep 4 hour conversations with people. And often people would be like, oh, that's, really shifted something in the direction of my life over something that we were talking about. And I was like, well, that's just what it feels like to have a conversation because it's intuitive to me. It comes easily to me. It's how I enjoy being in the world. And so that kind of denial is basically always the shape of like, what's the place that you're making things hard for yourself?
That resonates hard. Like when you were speaking, and I was like, yeah, what would my answer be for like what comes easy? And in fact, it would also be writing. Like when I am writing, particularly poetry, it's like not coming from me. It's coming.
Yeah,
I get in this like frenzy almost of just like blah, 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 blah. These words are coming out and it's like
totally.
cathartic. And similarly to you, like my earliest memories are making books and making people read them. Like I would
Yeah.
like bind these books together, like it's a story, and I'd be begging my mum. I was like, give me a topic for an essay. Like farm kid, not much to do. So that really resonates.
But you love it.
I love it. I
Yeah.
adore it. I absolutely love it. And in fact, it's like something that I've always been careful or conscious of, to be like, do I want to make that my work? And I guess this
Yeah.
actually leads me into my next question of like, when you have all of these things that you love, coaching, writing, art, how do you think about when you bucket that into something that you want to monetize or make formal into like a
Mm,
professional thing versus the thing you just keep because you love it and it brings you joy?
I think it there so what I think of as flow, part of which is what we just talked about, and I'm differentiating this from the psychological concept of flow, which is a different thing. But what I think of more as like the flow of are you in the flow of your life or are you pushing against it in some
Mm,
way? Like if we envision life as the proverbial river and there is a current to that river and a sort of trajectory of it, are you going with the current?
mm,
Or are you desperately trying to swim to shore or desperately trying to swim in
mm,
another direction or like get the river to change course in some way? I definitely don't mean that to, imply some sort of Newtonian fate to the entirety of existence, but just that there really is this observational element to do I feel like I'm in the flow of what's happening and like it is easy to go with that in particular ways? Or does it feel like every step I've made in this direction has been a struggle? And that's a sign of something. That is a
mm,
real, like, somatic and external signal that something's probably not right here. And so I think from that sense, and I will 100% acknowledge there is absolutely a sort of privilege to this statement of like there are people who absolutely just have to think about how they're going to have money for tomorrow. And if you are in that boat, then that is its own problem that you have to
mhm,
solve. But I think in terms of what feels like the deeper question from just the surface level survival, which is how do we consider when to monetize something? There's a big part of me that's like almost when the world asks you to. It's the point at which people start coming to you. So I had a whole instance of this in writing, which was the point in time I've always loved writing. I've always loved just like being in writing classes and being with other
mm,
writers and just like, getting to play with this form and learn from different people and all of those things. And I had an experience at some point deep into my writing journey that I was showing up to some of those classes and just like small one-off assignments, people were being like, you should be publishing. And it kept happening.
mm,
And the thing that I realized off of that was like, oh, I can keep pushing against what the flow of this is. But the flow of this is now people expressing to me the more that I'm writing that you are a professional writer. And so either I can own that in some sense, and ask myself, okay, what kind of professional writer do I want to be, or what direction is interesting to me to go with this? What feels potentially alive in this realm? Or I can push against that and be like, I'm not a professional writer, and just like keep
mm,
pushing myself into writing classes that are really intended for people who are not professional writers, many of whom are total beginning writers, or this is the first time that they've written a story or written an essay, or maybe it's the second time or something like that. Spaces that ultimately it's now going to be a different kind of push for me to be in because it doesn't actually fit the flow of where I'm at. What fits the flow of where I'm at is talking with other professional writers about how they have shaped their careers or why they chose a particular direction, or people who are in similar places of their like right on the cusp of like starting to develop what their professional writing career looks like. And like those are more who feel like my peers at that point in time. And so it's acknowledging the flow in that way. And I think we get into trouble might be a strong phrase, but it's Often I see artists who are like just at the beginning of an artistic journey and they're already like, how do I make this my living? And I'm like, it's too
Mm,
early. Like
mm,
you haven't even found who you are as an artist or like who you are in this art form yet. But start producing stuff, start down that path. And if you get far enough down that path, what absolutely will happen is people will start telling you this is the
mm.
avenue in which I want this thing. Come sell your work in my store, or come do a show in my gallery, or I know someone else who does this thing and you should totally connect with them. Those kinds of opportunities and avenues will start to open up to you. And through that, if you continue down that road, there will probably start to be financial opportunities. And if you
Mm,
continue down that road deeply enough, there will even be large scale professional opportunities.
mhm.
But I think we're so in the cultural mindset of I have to decide preemptively if this thing is
Mm.
going to make me money or not and how much money it's going to make me. And it's like we really have to find out what it is before we can even ask that question.
This is fantastic because I just feel like this conversation isn't had nearly enough where you're exploring like the essence of the art that you might like to create, and the whole idea is like you don't even know what that is yet because you haven't been in it, so like it's going to emerge. It's like deep in the soil, and I think it comes from living in the society where we think that we have so much control. We think that we can plan our life and our career and everything within an inch of an inch. And it's like, you actually can't. You have no idea what's around the corner.
Totally.
I wonder, just hanging on that proverbial river analogy,
Yeah.
I love that. If someone is listening to this and they recognize themselves as being in the river, let's say for this example, they have their bills covered, they've got some runway, they're not in that camp of like, oh my gosh, I need to pay
Yeah.
rent tomorrow. So they're in an okay position, but they can feel that they're going the wrong way. They're swimming against
Yeah.
the current. How do they step out? Like, is there any advice you might give them to be like they can recognize themselves, but they don't know how to take that step?
Totally. It's the first thing I would say is they probably do know how. And so the question often is sometimes it's the how, but like someone who's truly in the how, like if you were only in the how question and that was the
Mm,
only thing that was happening, then you would just go find someone who knows the answer. It reminds me of the times in like my late teens, early 20s. I loved seeking out like the biggest professional artists in any field that I was interested in that I could find, and just like finding the avenue where they were giving a book talk or they were giving a presentation, they were running a workshop, whatever the thing was, and then it's like, oh, and I can pick their brain for like 15 minutes afterwards
mm,
and ask them whatever question I have about how or sort of what's going on for me. And most of them have written books on the subject. We're now in the proliferation of YouTube. YouTube is an
yeah.
incredible resource. Like the amount of stuff that you can find on YouTube is insane. It's like people who grew up in some culturally dying art form or form of like preservation or technique for some niche craft in the world
Mm.
that only 1,000 people know how to do, and you can literally just find them doing tutorial videos on YouTube. It's
Yeah.
hilarious and insane that this is the world that we live in, and it's wonderful. And so like how is often not the question. The question most often is, what is that person avoiding? And, I was thinking about it as well when you were mentioning the control piece, which is so true. We are all desperately delightful little humans who want to pretend that we have control over anything at all, and that safety is something that we can actually create. And I've been reflecting on a lot recently that there are particularly these emotions like fear and heartbreak and disappointment and things that I definitely grew up on a cultural level learning these are bad things. Like these are signs that something is wrong. These are signs that you go in another direction, and they're not. They're signs that you're in alignment. There is so little of fear, and I mean fear as a different thing from anxiety, because anxiety is an elevated nervous system state that is often pointing to something else entirely. But the actual experience of like, no, I'm afraid of something. Not that I have perpetual anxiety about something, which is often something else is being avoided in the system. But I'm afraid of something. There are so few experiences that we have where that fear is pointing us to a legitimate danger. Where what that fear is saying is don't walk down the dark alley. It's the middle of, it's like 1 a.m., you're coming back from a club, you're in the middle of New York. That's probably a bad decision. Let's not do that
Yeah.
one. And that's legitimate. That's great. Fear, in those specific instances, fear can be a great pointer for like danger. But most of the time, fear is, oh, I'm about to do this thing that feels new to me and it's really scary. Or, my relationship is hitting a new juncture, or my career is hitting a new juncture, or I want to abandon the career that has been a source of control and safety forever in order to go do the thing that I really want to do, and that feels scary. And it's like that fear is a sign that we're in alignment, not that we're out of it. That fear is not something that says don't go there. It's something that says that's an area that's deeply meaningful to you. That's why you feel fear about it. The reason that
Mm.
you don't feel fear about the job that has, kept you in a proverbial sense of control and safety for years is because it doesn't mean anything to you anymore. And so, like, the total lack of fear in some area is often more the sign that we're out of alignment than that we're feeling fear in some area.
Wow. Mic drop. This takes me back to this workshop that I just ran in Columbus, Ohio for the Slowdown Summit.
Yeah,
And my opening question, the opening prompt was, I refuse to let myself blank because
yeah,
I am deeply afraid that blank. And I was like, you've got 7 minutes and you're just gonna write. I refuse to let myself. What is it? Because I'm deeply afraid that. What is it? And the
yeah,
whole purpose of this exercise, it came to me as part of a women's circle that I was a part of, is just to like name it and then honestly see that so many of them are a little bit silly. Like when you just like go and to write it down and to be like, maybe that's actually not so scary, or maybe it's a little bit silly, or maybe it's worth that fear. Like, okay,
yeah,
maybe it's worth leaning into that fear. So that kind of ties in for
yeah.
me.
And I think it's, and heartbreak is very similar in the sense of like we think of heartbreak in a large scale media model of like, the person who has experienced a very significant loss. And that's what heartbreak is. And actually we experience heartbreak all the time. There are all of these little heartbreaks of like, oh, I didn't get to talk with someone I love about the thing that I was excited to talk with them about because we just both got
Mm,
busy that day. Or, I didn't get to see a person that I love and care about for a week because they were on a vacation or on a work thing doing something that's really meaningful to them. And that's
mm,
great. And there's a little heartbreak in that of like, oh, but I don't get to see them. Or even on the like meaningful creative project level of just some aspect of it, you run up against something and realize that like, oh, this aspect of writing is a little bit heartbreaking for me. Maybe it's the point in time
mm,
that I finish a novel and I have to let go of those characters.
mm,
Maybe it's, whatever it is, but there are just all of these places that we're constantly experiencing heartbreak. And what that is telling us is there are all of these places that we're constantly experiencing love. And
mm,
so, if the thing that you do is start avoiding the heartbreak, the thing that you're doing is starting to avoid the love. And so you're going
There's
to,
that mic dropping again.
and it, between the two of them, it's like, oh, if what's happening is you're avoiding fear and heartbreak, then you're avoiding anything that's meaningful to you in the places that you experience the most love in the world. And that's why going all the way back to the how question, it's so often not a how
Mm,
question. It's what are you
mm,
avoiding? What have you been taught is dangerous that actually is where your aliveness lives, where your love lives, where, the things that are most meaningful to you in the world are. And at some point, somebody, some circumstance, some consistent force in your life taught you that's a sign of danger. That's a
mm-hmm,
sign, usually in the form, ironically, that is, you're not going to get that thing if you do that. So it's like the
mm,
form in which you've been taught it's danger is like you're not going to get love if you go do that thing that feels like love to you. Or
mm.
you're not going to have anything that's meaningful to you if you go do that thing that feels meaningful. And at some point in time, you bought the story. And what ultimately happened in you buying that story is you started avoiding the very things that are important to you. You started struggling against the current instead of feeling where your own flow and your own ease and your own sense of these things is and just following that.
Totally. I was just going to loop it all the way back to the improv hard lesson where it's like, what's the easy thing? What's the easy thing? I want to spend some time exploring creativity and play
Yeah.
because, again, I don't think this gets anywhere near enough airtime. We're in this world of like optimize, efficiency, gains. And so, can you start by giving us kind of a flavor of why this is important? Why does
Yeah.
creativity and play even matter?
Gosh, because it's everything. So Stephen Porges, who developed polyvagal theory, which for anyone who doesn't know is the vagus nerve runs through your body, connecting obviously your brain to your jaw and mouth, like your facial expressions, to your lungs, so your breath, your heart, so your heart rate, your gut, and consequently your digestion and your digestive
Mm,
state. And this is what became in pop culture the fight, flight, freeze response.
mm,
This is the system that tells you whether you are in a state of safety, whether you're in a state of fight or flight, what we refer to as a yellow state, or whether you're in a red, which is a free state. And that these also correspond loosely with like evolutionary parts of the brain, where if you are in a state of safety, you have the most vocal prosody. There's the most dynamic range in your voice and in your intonation. There's the most dynamic range in your facial expressions. You have access to higher cognitive thinking. And as you slip into yellow, as you slip into a fight or flight response, the facial expressions will flatten, the vocal tone will flatten, and you'll have less access to a cognitive response. And then if you go into a freeze response, that's effectively that's the reptilian play dead response. So you're totally losing a sizable portion of just like cognitively functional motor control of, all of the higher functions. For a long time, these states were held as oppositional to each other. And what has happened as he has elaborated on the theory, as more research has been done, is we've realized you can be in green, which is that state of safety where you have access to all of your functions, and yellow at the same time. And in fact, that is a critical part of human development, of childhood development, of our ability to regulate ourselves. And if we think about this on the child level, this is quite obvious. Children do things like play tag. They do things like run up to each other, basically slap each other on the arm, and then run away. And It's like literally the thing that they are doing with each other is playfully activating a fight or flight response in a state in which they know they're safe. And in that state, they're teaching each other how to regulate. They're teaching each other that you can be in an activated nervous system state. You can be in a state where your heart rate is higher, where you feel elevated in some way, and you're still safe and socially connected. It's also why, there's sort of almost the childhood trope of like a bunch of kids being like, hey, we're just playing, you're taking this too seriously. Which unfortunately, of course, unbeknownst to the children, speaks to that particular child has probably already endured some kind of trauma that is, removing them from the ability to engage in that kind of co-regulation practice. It is already yellow does not feel playful to them. Yellow feels like actual danger. And so somebody activated, even another child activating yellow with them from a playful state, they're like, wait, why danger, danger? And the other kid's like, hey, I'm just trying to play with you. I'm trying to do this thing that is helping all of us to regulate, that's helping all of us to know that we're safe. And this applies into adulthood across the board. The ability to be in a socially connected, playful state while engaging in something difficult is probably one of the most important, just like base level adult maturity skills that we can develop. Can you be in the difficult business meeting? Can you find out the difficult news? Can you be in the fast paced, high pressure environment where everything is happening and be the person who's laughing and enjoying themselves
Mm.
and being like, we're all tired at the end of the day. But you know what? That was a shit show. It was our shit show. And here we are. We're still here. Or are you the person who your nervous system did not know how to feel safe in that environment? And by the end of the day, you have collapsed into a panic of nerves. And the thing that is the difference between those two people is play. And for the person who is in the collapsed nervous system state, I 100% guarantee if I stuck that person into an improv class, they would be the person, and we often find these people in beginning improv classes who would say something to the effect of, I haven't played in 10 years. I haven't done anything of this. I have not done a form of just like nonsense self expression in decades. And it's like, well, of course your nervous system is locked up. Why wouldn't it be? Like, it doesn't have experiences in the world of just getting to express in any way that it wants to, of getting to yell in a room or make random noises or just flap your arms around and, be ridiculous. It's constantly in a state of like, I need to be tense. I need to be
Mm.
in whatever this rigidity is, in whatever this control is. And the way out of that is play. So on the base level, that's why I'm like, play is literally everything. It is
Mm.
your ability to connect with other humans. It's your ability to do the things that you want to do with more vibrancy and aliveness and enjoy them more and all of that. And then as we get into the layers of that, there's a story I really love that I go back to every so often. I imagine it is probably a little bit apocryphal, but Richard Feynman, who, for the sake of any listener who does not know who he was a very famous physicist in the United States, won the Nobel Prize in quantum mechanics, and also just quite famously a little bit of a trickster. Wrote a lot of personal essays that are great, very enjoyable, little bit misogynistic. Just, the warning for anyone going in who was not prepared for that side of things, but otherwise very enjoyable. And he tells a story of basically the point in time that he was burned out on physics. And I want to say, and I'll probably get it wrong, that he was working at Princeton at the time. And the work that he was doing, he just, he didn't feel it anymore. And if I'm remembering the story correctly, he was on the phone with his sister, who was basically like, what happened? like, you love physics. What is this state that you're in where physics is a job in the jobbiest sense of jobs,
Mm.
and you're stuck in, your research or whatever it is that you're going through? Basically, where's the play? And this is the part of the story that I think is probably Feynman putting together something that's a little bit apocryphal. He was like, I set all of my research aside and I went downstairs to the cafeteria, and there happened to be a food fight. And within the food
Amazing.
fight, somebody threw a tray full of food across the room. And the tray, as it went through the air, was wobbling slightly side to side as it was moving through the air. And he thought to himself, as the story goes, I wonder what causes that wobble. And opened up his notebook, started doing a bunch of calculations on that, and just investigating that curiosity from the
Mm.
place of, this is what feels playful to me in physics. This is what feels alive to me in this field that I actually love doing, going back to the ease
Mm.
thing. And according to him, that line of curiosity is what eventually led him to the Nobel Prize.
Wow.
And so on the smallest scale, it's like creativity and play is literally just your ability to regulate, to be social, to function in a state that is even remotely enjoyable to function in as a human. On the larger scale, the greatest discoveries in any field, the people who make the biggest advances, the largest innovations, anything that is a career changing work or a career defining work, I would wager less than 20%, less than 10% of those happen from a state of controlled rigidity. The overwhelming majority of them happen from a state of creativity and play, and from someone who loves what they're doing, loves engaging with their work. And I mean work in the most like deeply personal, meaningful sense of what a person's work is, not the version that is what is their job, but who is engaging with their work because they genuinely love their work. And then the creativity and play of that is what leads them to become large names in their field or to make major discoveries, and so on.
You know, Avi, when I came into this conversation, you asked me how I was, and I was like, I'm a bit tired. And now I'm like, I've got another 8 hours in me. It's 6 o'clock here. I am jazzed. I want to go play. I want to go ride. I want to go run through the forest like a cheetah. This has been such a cup filling conversation. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wish I had, that you wish you had a chance to speak about?
I don't think so. I love that. I think just on the on the most base logistical level, I do take on one-on-one clients and also do speaking and facilitation and workshops. I'm sure we will have the link to my website somewhere, but for anyone who is just listening to this, it's Avi, A-V-I, V as in Victor. So AVI, love, Love, coaching.com. And yeah, it's such a pleasure talking with you. I have
Yes.
absolutely, I had absolutely no doubt going in that we could find any number of threads to go down, especially given the two of us and how much we both love the generalist world community.
I think we need a part two, to be honest, because I
Totally.
still have more questions. So we will also link all of your stuff in the show notes. So we will
Great.
highly encourage folks to get in touch and stay tuned for the part two because my questions are I still have a page full. So Avi, thank you so much. This has been a delight.
I'm excited for it. Thank you so much, Millie.